All right. Video time. So I did a video yesterday. I can't remember the exact title. It was basically about the poly crisis that we face now and how this is going to intersect with things like our consumption of fossil fuels and therefore our contributions to global heating. Things have escalated. I think they're going to continue to escalate for the next half of a year. I think we are definitely into World War III now. The U.S. Congress refuses to declare war on Iran. This has been sort of a historical reality. The Congress is run by Republicans. They don't want this to be a war because war would be a problem for the American people. Donald Trump got elected on basically saying he's a peace president. He doesn't want forever wars. He doesn't want America injecting itself into the internal affairs of other countries, and et cetera, et cetera. But he's been doing that constantly since he got elected. So now he's, for the second time in as many months, excuse me, he's bombing Iran and blowing up, killing their leaders. This is a big deal, right? Sinking their navy, and just today, the U.S. Navy, a submarine, used a torpedo to sink an Iranian warship that was not even in the area of the conflict. The warship was out in international waters. I don't even know which direction it was headed. I don't know if it was coming back to the country or leaving the country, going somewhere else. But anyway, they sank it with a torpedo, which has not happened in the U.S. military since the Second World War. We haven't been running around sinking other countries' ships with torpedoes since the Second World War. We could have, but we didn't do that. In international waters, it's not like this was a ship sitting in a port in Iran, which I guess that's the area, the theater of conflict. So in theory, yeah, okay, we're bombing things, we might bomb a ship. We've sank a lot of ships on the Iranian Navy in port and in the Persian Gulf. This one wasn't there. So now we're definitely into World War III. They're not going to call it that. Historians might call it that. And it may be declared after the fact. There was the U.S. was involved in the First World War. It was called the Great War at the time. It wasn't called the First World War until there was the Second. We were involved in the First World War with logistics and supplies and things like that, and we didn't declare war and enter the war until sometime into it. So we do have a history as a nation of avoiding entering world wars, and then when we get in there, what do? We fight them. We finish them. Right? We throw everything we have at them. Our navies, our air forces, our troops. And so this is not that, supposedly. But they're not ruling it out. So as this ramps up, again, sinking ships with torpedoes, something no one has seen happen since the 1940s. As we continue to ramp this up, this is going to spread. The Iranians, their strategy seems to be to bring every nation in the region, the Persian Gulf in particular, but also involving Israel, into the conflict by shooting missiles and drones into neighboring nations like Qatar and Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, to try to get them to enter the war, or to tell Donald Trump, look, we weren't expecting to get bombed by the Iranians. We're not in it. We're not in this. So you have to stop. Maybe that's what the Iranians are thinking. But in any case, the scope of the war expands, right? Now, as soon as we started blowing up Iranian oil terminals and pipelines and things like that to interrupt their capacity to transport crude oil, and as soon as the Straits of Hormuz, which are currently open, no one is saying the Straits of Hormuz are closed, but typically what happens is the Iranians retaliate by closing the Straits of Hormuz, and then that stops all shipping in and out of the Persian Gulf. And the Persian Gulf is where all the oil terminals are for oil transportation on ships from places like Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and others. Yes? My wife. Okay, well, try to minimize interruptions. Thanks. So, as soon as they start interfering with, as soon as anybody starts interfering with oil resources and transportation and refining and all that kind of stuff, then that automatically involves more nations. For example, China gets some percentage of their oil from Iran. I don't think they have any oil resources of their own, so they get all their oil from somebody, but they get a sizable percentage of it from Iran. People are already wondering what's going to happen to China, how they're going to react if you cut off their oil supply. This is an existential risk for them to lose their oil supply. They have their own population. People need to get the jobs, and they need to get paid, and they need to drive their cars, and they have the whole thing going on, just like every other modern industrialized nation on Earth. Now, the U.S. is a little less vulnerable to this, but we're already involved in the war for our own reasons, but not oil. We have our own oil. We'd like to control more oil. We're now controlling Venezuela's oil. Maybe the idea is to control Iran's oil and cut off the Chinese. Well, if this is the plan, to control the oil and decide who gets the oil, then this quickly becomes a third world war. There's no way China is going to allow any third party to get in the way of their access to oil resources. They just can't. That's the end of China as a sovereign state if they don't get coal and oil and natural gas. They get their coal from Australia. All the U.S. has to do is torpedo an Australian coal ship headed for Japan. And that's the end of that, right? That's over. Australia won't send another ship full of coal to China or South Korea or the Philippines or anywhere else, Japan, that they might need something. So this very quickly spins out of control. Oh, by the way, the Iranians could sink a Australian ship headed for China. They could do that themselves. They have a navy. They have submarines, and if they don't do it, the Russians could do it. And why would the Russians do that? Again, there's lots of players, and all these players have a different set of investments. There is some shared investment in both continuing business as usual. So that's what we now call global industrialized civilization. But there's also some interest in interrupting that and disrupting that, and causing discomfort in the nations that are dependent on outside resources for coal, oil, and natural gas. A really key region of the world that's dependent on outside resources for energy is Europe and India. Europe, India, China, South Korea. So these are big players. They are linchpins in the manufacturing capacity of the world, the global industrialized civilization. It won't take much, and she's back. What is it? Oh, maybe she's not. Maybe the door just opened itself. That's fine. So it's... So I think you sat in that chair and it pushed the door open because it was never properly closed. I may have to start over. Anyway, the point of this video is that we're now heading into a really rough patch. This is an oil war, just like Venezuela was an oil war. The reasons for taking the oil from Venezuela, for the U.S. to take the oil and then do what they want with it, is to starve Cuba of oil. And once Cuba is starved of oil, then they're easy pickings, and then we take Cuba. This is imperialism, right? This is what's happening. There's already talk about taking Cuba. They'll fight, they'll resist, they'll do the whole thing, but the Iranians are fighting in resistance, and what good is that doing them? Nothing. So we'll take Cuba. Maybe it'll be easy, maybe it'll be hard, I don't know. We'll take the Iranian model. The first thing they'll do with Cuba is they'll decapitate the regime. They'll kill everybody related to the Castros and all of their ministers and everybody who looks and sounds like them, and then probably will just walk in. We're also going to take, the U.S. is also going to take back the Panama Canal, in part because the Chinese were making a play to take the Panama Canal for themselves, and they got kicked out by the Trump administration. Maybe Trump, maybe it was actually Biden, I can't remember now. But the U.S. kicked out the Chinese. Probably wasn't Biden, because he didn't do much. He was kind of weak. So I doubt it was Biden. But anyway, so the U.S. kicked the Chinese out of Panama, and now we're going to take Panama so they can't come back. And so on and so forth. So this is not what's happening. Donald Trump considers the Western Hemisphere, so that's North America, includes Canada and Greenland, and South America and Central America. He considers that to be his private playground. And of course, to continue that, the American people will have to elect presidents just like him. And they will. The American people will do that. They elected Trump, so why would they not elect his successor? Or he might even appoint his successor. We may be done with elections here in America. Donald Trump is talking all about not having elections in the midterms to end of 2026. And of course, we don't have elections in the midterms. We won't have them in 2028 for the presidential election. So America may be done as a elected representative democracy. So if that's the case, then these wars simply continue. If you're thinking that Donald Trump will retire or lose his attempt at a third term and someone will come in who maybe won't continue these wars, you are mistaken. So this continues. There's no way out of this now. This continues basically forever. And I can say that because I'm just referring to what's happening in America. America started this war with Venezuela, the war with Iran, and soon the war in Cuba and the takeover of Panama. We are doing this. We did that. So that's what we're going to do. Do you like it? Do you not like it? It doesn't matter. That's what's happening. So we have to start thinking about what impact the Third World War, early days, is going to have on the lives of Joe and Jane Sixpack. Common people need to get to work, need medical care, need retirement, and those kinds of things. Oh, and need affordability. They need their food to be affordable. Oh, and they need their food to be on the shelves. I mean, we're not a bunch of farmers, right? So we rely on certain things to continue. Now, a huge part of how, here I'll speak of Americans, but I know this also applies to, the British, the Europeans, certainly the Chinese, Japanese, the Koreans, Indians, Africans, South Americans. The big part of how we survive is access to crude oil. Coal is also important for generating electricity and has some role in steel making. Natural gas is important for generating electricity and fertilizers. The fertilizers can be transported in cargo ships, but the natural gas for electricity generation is much harder. You have to liquefy it and store it in super refrigerated tankers, and those are very expensive. And we just, somebody, just today, they're thinking Ukraine, but somebody just blew up a Russian liquefied natural gas container ship in the Mediterranean Sea. Again, on the high seas. The Mediterranean Ocean is not a zone of conflict. Not for the Ukrainians, not for the Russians, not for the Israelis, not for the Persians, not for the Americans. The Mediterranean Sea, up until today, was not a zone of conflict. Somebody blew up a Russian ship containing liquefied natural gas in the Mediterranean. Well, la-di-da. Here we go. So, if we start getting into tit-for-tat sinkings, then pretty soon somebody, somebody, who knows, torpedoes an American warship, maybe in international waters, just like we just did with the Iranians, maybe in the Red Sea, maybe in the Persian Gulf, maybe in the Mediterranean, who knows. There's lots of countries with submarines, lots of countries with torpedoes, and maybe a U.S. warship gets itself torpedoed and sinks with all crew, and that's an expansion of the conflict, right? Someone sinking a Russian LNG ship in the Mediterranean is automatically an expansion of the conflict. So that's where this is headed. This entire war is headed towards rapid expansion in the scope. China can't invade Taiwan if there is a major shutdown in their access to crude oil. Well, even coal for that matter, because they generate a lot of something like 60% of their electricity is generated with coal, mostly from Australia. So, mostly coming from ships, right? If someone starts sinking cargo ships bringing oil, LNG, and coal to China, it's going to make it harder for them to invade Taiwan. So they might simply say, all right, now we're in World War III. Okay, that's a thing. So now we're going to have to invade Taiwan quickly, because whatever crude oil, LNG, and coal we have laying around, that's probably what we're going to have, because somebody is sinking ships on the high sea. Okay. And if the Ukrainians can sink, like, we don't even know who did it, I'm just saying, okay? If the Ukrainians can sink a Russian ship in the Mediterranean, then maybe the Ukrainians can sink other ships in the Mediterranean headed for China, or maybe even sink them in the South China Sea or the Straits of Malacca headed for China. There's no real limits on what's possible here. It's just, what do they want to do? Where do they want to take the Third World War? And there's lots of players, and they want to take it whatever direction works best for them. So the U.S. and the Israelis have kind of kicked this off. Whether it's justified or not is immaterial to my discussion here. We are now in the Third World War. The scope is already expanding. We're going to hear this now every day. Every day it's going to be a bigger war. Every day there's going to be a new country jumps in. And then pretty soon it's just a global war, which we call a world war. And when it's a world war, it'll be the third. And there you go. Now, of course, what's up with this one is the Third World War is already being shaped around the availability of crude oil. That's where it kicked off. And that's going to be the big argument. When the U.S. invaded Venezuela, we wanted their oil because we didn't want the Cubans to get it. We didn't want the Chinese to get it. We wanted it for our own purposes. So we took it. Now that we're bombing Iran, you can feel it. It's about the oil. Either we take it and we use it for our own purposes, or we simply don't let the Chinese get it. We simply tell the Iranians who they can sell their oil to. So as someone like China starts to feel the crunch, they're going to be more inclined to widen this war, to try and make a statement, a warning. They'll be calling up Washington, D.C. and trying to talk to Donald Trump and telling him to back off and stop sinking our coal cargo ships and stop sinking the liquefied natural gas ships and tell the Ukrainians to knock it off. And Donald Trump may simply say, whatever, I don't know anything about that. World War, not me, I'm not involved. And that's what he'll say. I have nothing to do with this. What will the Chinese do? They'll start sinking ships in retaliation. Now, nuclear-armed nations. Do I have to talk about this? I guess I have to talk about this. The U.S., Russia, China. The U.S. and Russia have most of the weapons. China has a lot. They probably have enough to destroy civilization all by themselves. North Korea, India, Pakistan, who hate each other, right? Israel. There's enough players who have interests in World War III. There's enough players that any of them can start sinking ships. Any of them can invade their neighbors. Pakistan, nuclear armed, just invaded Afghanistan over border incursions. So Pakistan and Afghanistan are at war. India could, if we're in the Third World War, India could simply take sides and attack Pakistan from the other side. Now Pakistan is at war with Afghanistan and India. China has been in conflict with India for generations. They could attack India from the other side. The Third World War. Let's just do this. All the gloves are off. All the guardrails are down. All the rules of engagement have changed. Donald Trump changed them. He's like, whatever I want, I get, and I have a Navy and I have an Air Force, and I'll just take whatever I want. And so everyone's thinking, okay, that kind of works for me. And so everybody who has a big military and a Navy and nuclear weapons, which is kind of the deciding factor here, they can do whatever they want. And there's enough players right now out there doing whatever they want. So how long does it take us to get to nuclear war? And nuclear war doesn't have to be a massive exchange between the U.S. and Russia. It could be an exchange between India and Pakistan, a couple of tactical nukes back and forth, and then they stop doing that. But it's good for their own populations to get their own people fired up, waving the flag. It's good for elections, good for optics, good for the news cycle, and everyone proves that they're all puffed up and they've got nuclear weapons and they can use them. And so we can have regional conflicts. Also, if Israel gets tired of the Iranians shooting ballistic missiles into Israel, or if they get tired of Hamas doing that, or the Houthi doing that, or Hezbollah doing that, all of whom are clients of Iran, funded by Iran, munitions from Iran, everything else, marching orders from Iran. If the Israelis get tired of that, they've got nuclear weapons. They can put an end to it. They haven't so far, but they could. And even the U.S. could do that. If Israel gets tired of it and there's a mass fatality event in Israel because there's just so many missiles raining down from so many enemies, the U.S. could come in and just nuke Iran. Would they do that? I don't know. Donald Trump is pretty mercurial. He wakes up at 2 o'clock in the morning making decisions about things. And he doesn't consult with Congress. He doesn't even consult with the military. Everybody in the military is a lapdog for him. They're all bootlickers. So, if he wakes up at 2 o'clock in the morning, decides he's had enough of Iran, or, they've done something to Israel, or they've done something to Saudi Arabia, and he doesn't like it, or even if the price, this is how weird things can get, okay? The price of oil goes up because of this conflict. Now, no, he and Israel started this conflict, so you would think, okay, this is going to cause an increase in the price of oil. But maybe they just ignore that until it actually happens. Well, if the price of oil goes to $200 a barrel, $250 a barrel, and that starts to increase the price of gasoline in the U.S., well, of course, all over the world, but what does he care about the world? If it starts increasing the price of gasoline in red states in the U.S., then the people are complaining. It's costing me too much money to fill up my Ford truck. He might wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, see some tweet from some angry governor in some red state, and say, "Okay, I'm going to put an end to this." And he sends the U.S. Navy or because the Navy and the Air Force both have nukes, to drop nuclear weapons on Iran. He could do that. Oh, that's scaremongering. You are suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. He could do that. He's capable of doing that. And that's how he would do it. He would do it at 2 o'clock in the morning. Because he's pissed. Because he's looking bad. Because he's been embarrassed. He told the American people, you're not going to get any harm from this war. We're going to, he's not calling it a war. It's a special military operation, which he learned from Vladimir Putin. That's what he calls his not war in Ukraine. He calls it a special military operation. Well, I'm going to call it a war, and so is everybody else. It's World War III, all right? This is the third time around for humanity. But he promised the American people, meaning his voters, that he wouldn't involve them. Well, if crude oil on the open market hits $200 a barrel, then those people are involved. Unless he's going to put a price cap on the cost of gasoline, I'm not sure how he would do that. We are a capitalist country. You don't tell corporations what to charge for their goods. That's communism. That's central planning. So I don't know if he's going to do that. People will scream and holler that he's now a communist dictator, not just a regular old dictator. He's a communist central planning dictator. That's not going to go well. So I don't think he's going to do that. He's just going to let the prices go up because, I mean, he doesn't pay it, right? So what does he care? And now he's elected. So what does he care? And he's elected for life. So what does he care? Why would he care if people in the U.S. have to pay more for gasoline? Probably going into this conflict, someone probably said, well, you know, this is going to raise the price of crude oil. And he probably asked, so what? What does that do? Well, that'll raise the price of gasoline. Yeah. Again, so what? Well, people will be angry and disappointed. And, you know, you're supposed to be making living in America more economical. And he's going to say, well, that was before I was elected. Now I'm elected. So what? That's how that conversation is going to go. Because that's how the conversation always goes. So the impact of the Third World War is that it involves oil from the outset. Control of oil. Who has it? Who's going to get it? Who may not get it? And who needs it the most? And what can I get out of them if they need so much of this stuff? It's about control. It's about bending the knee. It's about hegemony. It's about world domination. And you do that through domination of crude oil. And it works because crude oil is the basis of everything that everybody does all the time. Your food, your medications, your electricity, manufacturing, so everything you own, your car, your furniture, your tables, your computer, lighting, everything, okay? Plus your electricity for all the things you do. Again, lighting, operating your equipment, cooking, cleaning, refrigerators, transportation, all the lights, all the turn signals, everything out on the street. There's an airline industry that can't function at all without jet fuel. They're just grounded. They can't fly without jet fuel. And then there's the U.S. military, which, you know, what? It could end up burning half the crude oil that the U.S. receives from all of its different resources, including internal. The U.S. military could end up with half of it. Just, you know, zooming their ships around, flying their airplanes around, their jets, their bombers, you know, boots on the ground, everything else. It's expensive and it's energy intensive. So you have to have lots of crude oil. So any crude oil you get, you're going to keep it for yourself. You may just leave it in the ground just for yourself to pull on when you want to. The Venezuelans may not be allowed to sell crude oil to anybody except the U.S., which was how that original deal went down. They were going to sell their crude oil to the U.S., ship it to Texas, and the oil companies located in Texas were going to refine it. And they even built special refineries just for Venezuelan crude. And then all that went sideways, and now they're trying to bring all that back. As crude oil availability begins to erode due to the Third World War, and everybody trying to get theirs and to keep it for themselves, then you're going to find out. You're going to find out, I already know this, but you're going to find out, so is everyone else going to find out, that crude oil drives everything. Everything. Everything is crude oil. Everything. You can breathe without crude oil, although some people have trouble even with that. If you have asthma, you're not going to get your inhaler for your asthma without an entire system of medications and medicine and producing and shipping and delivering all these medications for people, and some people won't be able to breathe because there's no crude oil for making inhalers. Or there is, but inhalers become really rare because the crude oil is being used for so many other things. So the inhalers become really rare. A lot of our medications actually come from India. So if India is all involved in war, they may not use their crude oil to make medications for us. So the medications just disappear, and no one even knows why. Well, because they weren't being created locally. All this stuff was being created in China, India, the Philippines, right? Malaysia, Singapore. Because that's where it can be done cheaply. Well, If you find yourself in the Third World War, you're not going to have inhalers. Now, I got news for you. The last time we had a world war, the Second World War, people didn't have inhalers. All medications went to the troops. A lot of food went to the troops. During the Second World War, and certainly the First, people were encouraged to have local food production, victory gardens, and things like that. If you want food, you have to raise your own food, because most of the food is going to the troops. So there you go. And if there's a Third World War, then countries that produce food for other countries and ship it to them may refuse to do that if that other country is now the enemy. You know, we get chips for our computers and our AI and all that other stuff from Taiwan. Well, China thinks Taiwan is part of China. What if they invade Taiwan? That's it. Then they determine who gets the chips for the computers and the cell phones and the everything. So now those things don't happen anymore. You could just have not happen. Or if they do happen, the chips are so hard to come by that they're so expensive when they are found and produced locally that they go into the military. The military just gets them all. And, you know, the cell phone you own now may be the last cell phone you ever own. Because once China takes Taiwan, Third World War, once North Korea bombs South Korea because we're at war, then these things that right now are just transparently available suddenly vanish because we're having a world war. And the fossil fuels don't move, and the goods don't move, and the airlines are grounded, and any resources that are available actually go to the military, including the food. And so we find ourselves unexpectedly not having access to things that just seemed trivial, like food. I keep coming back to this example. I have to find another example because it seems like I'm picking on someone, but the UK imports something like 60% of its food. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong on that. They stated another way. They produce locally on the islands 40% of their own food. So where's that food coming from? I don't know. They probably don't even know. It just shows up. The buyers at the stores and the supermarkets and the distributors, they go out into the global economy and they find all the things. The coffee and the tea and the spices and the sugar and even the beef, right? And the pork and the chicken. Some of that's produced locally, but a lot of it is not. Now, they may be buying some of that from the U.S., and you may say, well, that's a safe avenue. You can always buy stuff from the U.S. We'll always sell stuff to the U.K. Not true. That is not true. The United States of America is currently in a trade war with every other nation on earth, wanting concessions. You know, make it worth my time. And will the UK want to create that kind of relationship with Donald Trump? You have to make it worth his time. You want food? Oh, we got lots of food. What do you have for me in exchange? Right? Can you make this worth my time? Worth my trouble? Because lots of people want what I have here in the U.S. So you're coming to me on bent knee looking for what? What was it again? Food? Oh, and maybe some crude oil? And maybe some medications because you're kind of running out of all that stuff because of the Third World War? Well, let's see. Oh, you're just going to have to make it worth my time. Now, that sounds like science fiction, but it's not. That's how it's happening, folks. Welcome to the end of civilization. The Third World War will end everything that we have known about Western civilization. Western civilization has metastasized, spread to all other parts of the world. You find indications of Western civilization in Africa, in South America, in Asia, right? Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Philippines, Singapore are deeply, deeply embedded in Western civilization. They have Western values. They trade with traditionally Western nations like the U.S. and Europe. And it's just one big happy party, right? Well, that's about to end. The Third World War is going to destroy all that. And all the interconnections for things like chips, okay, that's pretty obvious. Crude oil and coal, yeah, I get that. Not everybody has their own crude oil or their own coal, fair enough. But also food and medicines. and technology, so chips and things like that for manufactured goods. Everything has a chip these days. Cars have chips. Of course, cell phones have chips. Pretty soon, your reading glasses are going to have chips, and all this interdependency that's all wound together and has been increasingly interdependent and wound together over the last 50 years, maybe certainly 70 years since the end of the Second World War. All of that is now going to come undone. And the first part of it that comes undone is any part of it that's dependent on crude oil. And what part of it is dependent on crude oil? All of it, including the food. All of it. As people begin to realize that their continued existence is at risk, they are not going to be happy. They're going to be angry with their leadership. What would they be angry about? They'll be saying, you knew this war was coming. Of course, in the case of Donald Trump, they'll say, you created this war. You could have told us in advance that we are going to suffer. You could have made provisions so we didn't suffer as much. You could have found ways to create more food locally, more medications locally. You wanted industry to come back to our country. That never happened. Why did it not happen? You could have done that, and you didn't. And now we can't manufacture new cars. We can't manufacture any kind of goods, really. We're kind of back to medieval, handicrafts for a lot of things. Repair culture. People who spend their time repairing broken things and can't repair cars anymore, of course. But maybe it'll be like Cuba. Cuba drives old cars because they can be repaired. So all the cars in Cuba are these 1950 Chevys and Fords and things like that. And you think, how quaint. Well, they didn't have a choice. You didn't have a choice. They could get vehicles from Russia and more recently China, but they never had any money. So they had to get by with what they had. And that's nice. There's some value in that, right? And if you have your old car that you can actually repair, doesn't have any chips in it, doesn't have any. And the other things that need to be manufactured that wear out, like spark plugs, points, and whatnot, are probably available somewhere. And maybe you can make them locally, or maybe you can repair the ones you've got. So, we end up rolling back to a less complicated scenario. Now, I happen to have a 1968 Dodge 1-ton pickup. Runs really well. I just replaced the brakes. Runs really well on gasoline. Under the right circumstances, because of the Third World War, my truck might be the only truck that operates in my community, provided I can get gas. And the reason is because today's vehicles are very complicated. A Ford truck, a Chevy, or whatever else is maybe assembled in the U.S., but the parts all come from overseas, like virtually all of them. a motor plant right now, a auto plant in Detroit, gets parts from Canada, Mexico, China, I want to say Korea, Japan. And this is to manufacture U.S. traditional U.S. branded vehicles, not to repair Hyundai and Toyota, and although that is also a thing people will need done, but just to manufacture a new Ford. All those parts are coming from other parts of the world. What part of a Ford on the assembly line actually comes from America? Tires? Light bulbs? I don't even know what part of a Ford truck or a Chevy truck comes from America. Very little. So Detroit just shuts down. If we can't get stuff from China and Singapore and Taiwan and South Korea and Mexico and Canada because of whatever, trade wars, the Third World War, problems with shipping, problems with the dollar, problems with tariffs, whatever the reason is, then all of a sudden we can't manufacture trucks in this country. Now, the U.S. government will, of course, make sure that they can manufacture the things they need for war. A lot of this happened in the Second World War. Manufacturers like Westinghouse, General Electric, of course, Ford, Detroit, Packard, Ford, Chevy, Packard, Chrysler, that was the one, that were manufacturing consumer goods for Americans in the 30s. They got press ganged into making military applications. So they were making aircraft engines, engines for tanks. They made tanks. I can't remember which one it was that made tanks. They actually cranked out tanks instead of cars. And all the other things for war. Airplanes, of course, and the shipyards were used to make warships. Now, this was really lucrative for these companies. They got guaranteed contracts from the government. They kind of pretty much stated their own price. So they made a lot of money during this time. The government had to buy these things. Only the government could buy these things. The taxpayers paid for it. There was no question the taxpayers were going to pay. The money was flowing, and these companies got all that money. And then after the war, they went back to manufacturing what they were making before. Plus, they had all this new technology, right? They learned a lot about manufacturing when they had to gear up for war. And they learned a lot about engines when they had to make engines for the military, and so on and so forth. So when they started making cars, they made much better cars after the war. It was the golden age of the American automotive industry. We will go through that again during the Third World War. Everything will be converted over to military applications. Men who currently work for other types of manufacturing will be forced into making tooling and whatnot for the military. Everybody basically gets employed by the military. We won't be able to import military components from Canada, Mexico, Singapore, Malaysia. We'll have to make them all locally. We'll have to build factories to make things locally. We'll have to tool up the factories. We'll have to train mechanics to work at lathes all over again, right? No one does this anymore. And that's all because of the Third World War. So what's going to happen is that not only do many of us humans, of the 8,000 million humans currently on Earth, not only do many of us lose access to energy resources, as is happening right now in the Persian Gulf, but also many of us will lose access to manufactured goods, food, medicines, jobs. Well, some of us will get great jobs in industry making munitions for the war, but some of the rest of us, businesses will basically go bankrupt because they can't get the parts they need to continue. What if a company locally was making solar panels? They were making solar panels from components from the usual bunch: China, Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, and all of a sudden they can't get those things because there's a war on. And either they don't let us have those things, they're keeping those things for themselves, or they're the enemy. Who's going to be the enemy? China could be the enemy, and they just cut us off. Nope, you don't get any more components for solar panels because 90% of that comes from China. And China is now the enemy, so cut that right off. And that company that was assembling solar panels in the U.S. for use in the U.S., they just disappear. They go out of business. Now, maybe it's not so bad because their employees, they just make a phone call to the Department of War and say, hey, I'm a machinist, I'm a whatever, and I'd like to work in the Department of War, and then maybe they get a job. But that means that everything, we have a war economy like Russia has now. We have a war economy, and all the resources and all the manpower and all the money and all the investment goes into war. Now, the problem with doing that with war is that war does not produce goods. War destroys things. When you work in a factory all day and you're making bombs and missiles, those are not going out into your communities to increase the GDP or create more jobs. Those are going into the battlefield where they will be destroyed. Now, of course, that's guaranteed employment, right? Because now you have to make more bullets and more bombs and more missiles and more rockets and everything else. But your civilian economy is being neglected. After the war, you won't have a civilian economy. There won't be any jobs for those people who used to make bullets and bombs and missiles and tanks and airplanes. Now, if we just continue to do that, then I guess that's okay. But who was paying for all that? That was the government paid for all that. Where do they get the money to pay for all that? Well, they're supposed to get that from the economy, through taxes and selling bonds and securities and whatever else. But if nobody has money, because the civilian economy is gone because of war, then where's the money come from to continue industrializing and hiring people to work in the war? When the war is over, it's hard to justify the expense of continuing to make airplanes and bombs and missiles and bullets and everything else. So you stop doing it. That's what always happens. Maybe we're forever on a war footing. Maybe it's just eternal war forever and ever, like in the novel 1984, right? Eternal war. Well, that's one of the reasons you have eternal war, is you can't figure out how to employ people except to make bullets and bombs and missiles and ships and planes, and then you have to blow them up. It's just not good enough to make an airplane, because if you just made an airplane, now you have an airplane, and now you're done. No, you have to send that airplane into war, get it blown to pieces, and then you can make another one. That's how it works with war. With a war economy, that's how it works. You have to blow things up. Meanwhile, you're impoverishing your civilian economy. What World War III is going to do is destroy business as usual. People may find themselves working for the government. They may find themselves working in munitions factories. Every other part of the U.S. economy, and the British economy, and the German economy, and the French economy, and the Chinese economy, and the South Korean economy, and the Japanese economy, every other part of the economy, global and local, will simply cease to exist. All of it is dependent on crude oil. The crude oil is being shut off. Whoever has the crude oil will basically earmark it for use in the military, because we're at war. Or they'll leave it in the ground for later use by the military. And so Americans won't have access to crude oil. That's it. Now, do you need crude oil when you're at war? People probably think they do. They got their truck, they have their job, they have to get to work, they have to do these other things, they have to move goods around. I drive a truck, I move farm products from the Midwest to the East and the West coasts, where the people are mostly, and I drive a truck, and now I can't get parts for my truck because everything is now going into the war economy, and my truck broke down, I have no replacement parts. Oh, plus, there's no diesel. So if I wanted to transport something across the country because somebody I work for wants to move their stuff over there, I can't really do that because there's no diesel, because it all went to the military. And will they make diesel available for civilian uses? They might. They might realize, okay, can't take all of it. But what if the Chinese and the Russians, what if they start knocking out our ability to process crude oil into fuels? Which they could do. They wouldn't have to even use bombs. Well, they could still have explosives, but it could all just be terrorist cells. That's how the Ukrainians are doing it in Russia. A lot of it, well, some of it is drones. They fly drones and they blow things up. But some of it is also on the ground. Operatives just go in and blow things up. You can cause a blackout in a region with a rifle. You go find a substation, and you take your rifle and you put a couple of rounds into the big transformers. Everything shorts out, and that transformer came from Germany. Does the utility company have a replacement transformer? Because you just took out the electricity for a big part of a city by punching holes in it with a rifle. And where are they going to get that? Well, they get that from Germany. Oh, but Germany isn't manufacturing anymore because they got cut off from the crude oil from the Middle East. They'd love to manufacture a big transformer for you, and so would the South Koreans. But they can't do that because they don't have access to crude oil. So that transformer stays blown up until there's a replacement, which might take years, might take decades, might take never. And are the American people and the British and the French and the Germans and the Singaporeans and the South Koreans and the Japanese and the Australians, are they ready for that? No, of course not. Of course they're not ready for that. They have no idea where this is headed, but they're going to find out. Is there any good side to all of this? Well, okay. Let's look on the bright side. Russia, an authoritarian regime, is being flushed down the toilet by the Ukrainians, of all people. Their oil resources are being taken offline. That's interesting to me. The Iranians are being bombed into the Stone Age by the U.S. and the Israelis. Their oil resources are being taken offline. That's interesting. The Venezuelan regime was decapitated, has now become a client state, pretty much, of the U.S., and their oil resources are being taken offline. Huh. Do we see a pattern here yet? Shall I continue? When you take oil resources offline, you take manufacturing offline. We haven't even involved nuclear weapons yet. That's still out there. That could still happen. And what happens with nuclear weapons? Well, you start destroying manufacturing. You start destroying oil facilities. There you go. That's how my book, dare I do this? That's how my book starts. Iran and Saudi Arabia exchange very small, only a few nuclear weapons, but aimed at each other's oil facilities. And their oil facilities are taken offline, essentially forever, for all time, because the damage is so substantial. And no one is interested in fixing all that. It was fun while it lasted, and now it's done. And of course, as soon as you rebuild it, someone else can blow it up again. And you're not going to be able to rebuild it because you're not going to have fossil fuels to rebuild it with, because that's how you do that. You send in all the pipe layers and all the construction people and all the chemists and all the engineers and all the programmers, and they send them all in here, and they do all this work, and all these materials come from all over the planet, some of it from Germany, some of it from America, some of it from someplace else. And you put all this together, and you pull it all together, and you have all these people working, and they're all using fossil fuels, and they're all coming from friendly countries, and that's how it was built in the first place, during a period of peace. But now we're at war. So actually none of that happens. Ever. Probably never. So the Iranian oil resources and the Saudi oil resources go offline, probably, in a big way, essentially forever. And that's what we're heading into. That's what we're heading into, folks. We're heading into the end of modernity, because we're heading into the end of easy, inexpensive access to crude oil. They're taking it offline. Who's they? And I don't even know if they're doing it on purpose, but they are doing that. They might be doing it on purpose. I mentioned this in my video yesterday. Let's just wargame this, shall we? Let's just a thought experiment, as Einstein used to call it, a thought experiment. The elites have made a lot of money on industrialization, the industrialized economy, and all of that made possible with fossil fuels. However, there was a problem. Came from all that. Unintended consequences. They enhanced the natural greenhouse effect of the earth enough that now the earth is getting hot, and measurably so. And the problems are compounding. And we may be headed into a very, very dangerous period of time. Just with global heating. Just set aside war for a minute. Global heating alone. All that industrialization and all that manufacturing and all that transport and all that innovation and all that everything else heated the planet. And it's going to take tens of thousands of years for that to be reversed. So, the elites may be thinking, okay, well, we made a mess. All right, fair enough. We'll admit to that. We have to stop making a mess. We already have all the money. We have all the influence. We have all the resources. We own all the governments. We own all of the everything. There's about 1,000 of us that run the planet. We know who we know each other. We're all friends, right? Jeffrey Epstein knew a bunch of them. Well, that didn't work out for him, but nevertheless, that's how it's done. Okay, there's people like Jeffrey Epstein that bring all these wealthy people together, make all these deals, and Donald Trump is very much a part of that. And it's everywhere. It's everywhere. All through Europe, all through Asia, and maybe more recently all through Asia, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. There's billionaires in Asia now. And these people are running the planet to suit themselves. And they're making money, and they're being influential, and they're buying politicians, and now, of course, they're waging war. And this is their war. Donald Trump is one of the elites. Now, he's not the smartest of the elites, but he listens to a lot of them. He listens to Vladimir Putin. He listens to Xi Jinping. You know, his script is basically lifted from Vladimir Putin and the things he has done and the aspirations he has. Donald Trump has the same aspirations. So it's a big club, and you and I aren't in it. But we can see what they're doing. We can witness what they're doing. And I think they're a little bit worried about global heating. They made a lot of money. They became very influential. And but now they have this problem. They have a problem. They created the problem, but they have a problem of their own creation. But since they did create it, they know there's a problem. Now, most people in the world, Americans, British, Germans, French, they don't know there's a problem. Because once again, the elites control the media. So the elites controlling the media and controlling the research and controlling the publications and controlling the speeches and controlling the politicians, the elites make sure that people don't know what's going on. Now, they don't control me, but I don't have a very big audience, so I'm fine. I'm no harm to them at all. Here I am bloviating about their plans. Okay, so their plan might be, again, this is a thought experiment. Let's go forward. Their plan might be, well, we've kind of screwed the pooch here. That's not good. Is there a way we can fix that? Well, we could try technology. Nope, that didn't work. Back to square one. What are we going to do about this? And they may have realized they have to stop the fossil fuel-based economy because that's what's causing global heating. And they don't want to have to move to Mars. I mean, maybe it'd be nice if Elon Musk got to Mars first and made a nice country club there, and they could fly there on his BFR. And visit Mars. That might be fun to do, but they don't want to be forced to go live on Mars. That sounds dangerous. That sounds inconvenient and uncomfortable. And who wants to be forced to do that? So rather than be forced to go live on Mars because planet Earth is uninhabitable because of the heat, that's coming. Oh, and the heat, and the refugee crises, and the food crises, and the political crises, and the World War III, and the nukes, and then the radiation levels, and then everything else. Rather than leave all this and go to Mars, how about, here's a thought. How about we just stop the consumption of crude oil? We could do that. We, the elites, could do that. Nobody wants us to do that. Nobody wants that kind of conversation. Nobody wants to deal with it. No one wants to even imagine a world where that has happened. I imagine it all the time. I think about it all the time. I think about it constantly. All my videos mention what's going to happen to you when they pull the crude oil. And everyone says, oh, come on, Cougar, they're not going to pull the crude oil. That would be suicide. No. It's not suicide. It's how they preserve themselves. And do you think they don't want to do that? I mean, they know. Why do you think Elon Musk is trying to get to Mars? He could actually probably pull that off if he keeps pouring money into it, resources and creativity, and keeps taking risks. He wants to get to Mars. He wants to sit this out. Well, the rest of the elites are probably not going to be able to do that. They're going to have to do something else. So rather than bank on being able to go to Mars and watch the Earth implode via telescope, they may be thinking, okay, maybe now is the time to put an end to fossil fuel consumption because that also solves the problem. Or at least it keeps the problem from getting worse, which is the low bar here, right? That's the first step you got to make. First base is just to stop making the problem worse. How about we just start with that? Let's just start with not making the problem worse. That means leaving all fossil fuels in the ground. Now. Right now. I'm telling you that. That's what they have to do. They'll be resistant to doing that. They'll try to find another way that doesn't involve doing that. They like the way things are. They want things to continue. They like making money. They like being influential. They like having big parties. They like tearing down the east wing of the White House just for fun. And they like their lives. It's good to be king. It's good to be king. It's good to be king. Do I have to explain that? I shouldn't have to explain that. It's good to be king. So, having all these fossil fuels and all this hundreds of years of manufacturing and biggering and innovation, and all of it is true. It really did happen. But it has had this unintended knock-on effect of heating the planet. Now, people don't believe that. But trust me, the elites do. They absolutely know that. They absolutely believe that. They accept it. They're the ones who fund the science. They're paying for the science. They're paying for the papers to be published. You think they don't take their own advice? Of course they do. They may not like it. They may ignore it. They may try to find some way around it. But eventually they have to accept it. So, what if they did? What if they just accepted it? Huh. Well, they have a problem to solve. For themselves. For the elites. The 1% of the 1%. 1% of 1% of 8,000 million people is 8 million people. I just did the math for you. 8 million people. That's the ultra elites. That's the millionaires and the billionaires. And their entourage, their families, their friends, their service providers, right? The woman has her hairdresser. The man has his manservant, and they both use a tailor, and they have groundskeepers for their mansion. And, there's 8 million people involved in the ultra elites, and they own the planet. They pay for everything, and they're paying for the Third World War. And this was their idea. They could have stopped this. They could have not allowed Donald Trump to get elected. They could have not allowed him to have the thoughts he's having. They could have stopped him from having a bunch of weird people in his cabinet telling him weird, strange, conspiratorial things. So all of this must have been the plan, because they could have stopped this. They chose not to. They chose not to stop the Third World War. And the only reason I can imagine why they didn't stop the Third World War, and why they won't stop the Third World War, and why they are allowing World War III, and why they're going to allow everything to come crashing down, is because they're afraid of global heating. This is the only planet that supports life in the solar system. This is it. Mars is not really an option. It's maybe fun. Everyone needs a hobby, but it's not really an option. This is it, folks. And they run this planet. The rest of us are just allowed to occupy the space. But if we've become a problem, if we are now a problem because of our fossil fuel consumption, is it any surprise? Is it really any surprise? Do any of us have any right to be surprised that the Third World War is shaping up around oil? Venezuela, Iran, Canadian oil, soon Mexican oil, right? It's all in flight now. And the elites are going to, well, they already control the oil, but they let it be used for consumer purposes. And they can't do that anymore. That game is over. And they know that. They know that game is over. And they must end the game. Now, when they started this game, there was about 1 billion humans on Earth. That's, what? 15% of the current population? There was 1 billion people on Earth. That was still a lot of people. And those people were burning coal and wood and a bunch of other things. If we just stop burning everything, including coal, all of it, going back to the fall of Rome, if we just took ourselves back to the energy that was available after the fall of Rome, and they were burning a lot of coal, so maybe further back than that, then we would have a fraction of the current population of the Earth. And there you go. And the elites inherit the Earth. And what do the rest of us inherit? Whatever crumbs are left over. That's for us to determine whether we want to inherit crumbs or not. If crumbs aren't good enough for people, then they have riots and outrage and storming the Capitol. And then, of course, that's what the bullets are for. That's why we have militaries. That's what the bullets are for. And they'll have people in the factories making the bullets until they don't need the bullets anymore. Then they turn those people out of the factories into the streets. Good luck. Oh, and by the way, we're not giving you any bullets. You have to figure it out. World War III is a good way to destroy a bunch of troublesome nations, realign trading relationships, create a new world order, a multipolar world order, which both Russia, China, and America have agreed to do. It's also World War III is also a good way to kill a bunch of people. Oh, there's no good way to do that. It is an efficient way. How's that? That's how they would say it. It's an efficient way of culling the herd. Now, this is all a thought experiment on my part, but it's based on human behavior. I know what they know. They know that what I'm saying is true. They may not like the situation. They may not want to upset the apple cart that made them all so rich and famous and influential. But on the other hand, if they're going to have to upset the apple cart to save themselves, then let's upset things. Let's do this. And then after they've done that, they can start over again if they want to. They start building new nations and bring the fossil fuels back online and restart the aviation industry. And maybe 50 years from now, 100 years from now, they start to climb the ladder again. Except this time, they're not climbing the ladder from the fall of Rome. They're climbing the ladder from the fall of global industrialized civilization. So what? They've got penicillin, robots, AI, metallurgy, quantum computing, the internet. They got a lot of stuff. They've got a lot going on. They got a lot going on to start to climb back out. They can do it very quickly, very deliberately, have control of everything, and make sure there's not 8,000 million people and a bunch of consumers who only survive because of fossil fuels. Because that was a dumb idea. I mean, it made sense at the time. Turns out, who knew? It was a dumb idea. So I don't know. That's a thought experiment. Maybe the Third World War is going to serve a purpose. Maybe on accident, but who knows? They may seize the opportunity to cull the herd. Well, I am a doomer. It's right there in the title. I did write the book. And I'm writing another book called Ariadne. Talks about some of this stuff. Not quite on this level, but on some level. I think it's an interesting topic. And I think we're in for it, folks. Even if Donald Trump can be told to climb down from his perch and calm the hell down about things, even if he can be brought down and put back in his cage and told that if he wants to invade somebody, invade Portland, Oregon, right? That's all you get a chance to invade. Even if he can be told to climb down. I think that this happens eventually anyway. Russia has been backed into a corner. China, as a result, has been backed into a corner. These are authoritarian regimes. These are men, they're always men. These are men who are not accustomed to being told to sit down and shut up. They don't like that idea. Russia, Putin, he thinks he's the greatest thing that ever happened to Russia, and he wants to conquer Europe, and he wants to conquer the Middle East. And China, Xi Jinping, he wants to be emperor, literally, with all the emperor's robes and the emperor's shoes and everything else. And so, he doesn't want anyone telling him he can't be emperor. And Donald Trump is the mad king. He wants to be Caligula, wherever the mad emperors were at the end of the Roman Empire. He wants to be the mad emperor, and he wants everyone to genuflect and bend the knee and kiss the royal toe. And he wants all that. He wants all that stuff. These are what these people want. So even if we can avoid a big dust-up World War III around crude oil in the Middle East, even if we can avoid that, I don't see how we do, but even if we do, then it just gets pushed off a little further into the future. Because the people in power, this is what they want. And they're afraid of global heating. Even if they're in denial, they are surrounded by people who are afraid of global heating. People who are not in denial. People who understand the risk. And, losing your nation, what good does it do you to be king of the Western Hemisphere, everyone kissing the royal toe, if the Western Hemisphere becomes uninhabitable? If your kingdom, if everyone dies. And so maybe you're the king, and maybe you live in a dome, and maybe you have all the resources, and everyone kisses the royal toe, but you're by yourself. And you don't have any subjects, and you don't have any influence, and no one wants to hear what you have to say because there's nobody left. They're living hand to mouth. They're living in Stone Age existence, in a scrap metal age. No manufacturing, nothing, right? No food production. You have to make your own food. There's no supermarkets. There's no money. There's no credit card swipes. There's no baristas serving lattes. There's nothing. And you don't have a car, and you don't have an electric car, and you don't have solar panels, and where do you get your fire? You rub two sticks together, right? And so you're king of all that. Okay. I don't think they want to be king of all that. I don't think they want to be king of a trash pile that's on fire. So they're going to have to do something about us. And our driving, and our flying, and our moving of goods, and our jobs, and our health care, and our retirements. They have to do something about that. Because we're destroying the planet. 8,000 million of us. The elites are not. I mean, they're not going to admit to that. They're not going to admit to that. No, it's the rest of us. The useless eaters. We're the problem. So where does World War III go? I don't know. But I think I do. We shall see, right? What are you supposed to do? You're supposed to pay attention. You are supposed to find your community. Surround yourself with people who think like you do. Surround yourself with people who are willing to make a go at survival. Because the elites are going to do that. They all know each other, and they all know what to do, and they're going to do it. And so you have to be in the same frame of mind. You have to accept what's happening. You have to figure out how you're going to survive it. And then you need to do that. You need to execute. You need to have a plan. And you need to execute. I call that village life. And that's where this comes from. It was 100 days. People learning how to survive after the Third World War. That's what it's really about. And it's not a zombie book. It's not about, weird metaphysical stuff. It does have zombies in it, but they're kind of a joke. Read the book. You'll learn about the zombies. Yeah, it's what happens after. Something's going to happen after. Somebody's going to survive this. Might as well be you. Might as well be me. Why not? That's what I got. Like and subscribe, right? Let's get some more subscribers in here. Let's spread this word around. Get everybody all upset and angry and distrustful, all right? I don't want to form a village by myself. I want more people on board who understand that we have to do this. The elites are going to do what they have to do, including sparking off the Third World War. And then our responsibility is to do what we have to do. And if you think that's storming the Capitol with your guns blazing, well, you're going to meet a hail of bullets. Probably by AI-driven robots, right? They're going to be out there with their own guns. They're mow everybody down. So you have to come up with a different plan than that. Different plan than that, because the elites know that's what everybody's going to do, because that's what people always do. They panic, and they bring out their guns, and they start shooting people, and they start doing the thing. And maybe a little bit of that will be allowed, because that is one way to get rid of people. But are they going to let you come after them? No. No. That's not how you're going to solve your problem. Buy the book. Read the book. There's a clue in there for people that want to read the book. And that's it for me. I got things to do. Where'd the day go? I don't even know. Pay attention. These are the days of consequences. And my advice to you, that is all I got, is don't die.